Yeah, so namaste, very good evening for all of you in India. And I don't know, there were some people to join from US as well. So good morning to them. I'm not able to keep track of who all has joined. So welcome to this Jnana Vaividya 2.0, a vocational diversity speaker series, which will run over the next 8 weeks. I'm really thankful to our district governor, Rotarian BL Nagendra Prasad, as well as our vocational service director, Dr. PM Radhakrishna, for motivating us, inspiring us, and permitting us to conduct this series as a district project. So this is a Rotary District 3190 vocational team and Rotary Bangalore Whitefield Central initiative. Our objective is to bring speakers who have excelled in their vocation to all of you, such that we are able to learn during these COVID times when we are all locked in our houses. We have run this program last year from August to October for about 12 weeks, where we had elite 12 speakers. And in case somebody would like to go through these talks, they are all recorded. They are available on Jnana Vaividya YouTube channel. So you could subscribe to this YouTube channel. It's free. And you could listen to all these talks. They have been amazing, wonderful talks. And we have had over 1,000 people get benefited by these talks. And we plan to get another 1,000 people benefited by Jnana Vaividya 2.0. So we thank and specially welcome all the guest clubs who are here. 9 guest clubs are participating in today's program. And a special welcome to our speaker today, Ms. Divya Tiwari, as well as our chief guest, Mr. Kishore, Rotarian Kishore Jagirdar. I'm not sure if he has joined, but he should be joining any moment if he has not. And without taking much time, I would like to go ahead and talk a little bit about the vocational service avenue under which pretext we are conducting this program today. The vocational service avenue serves the community by various verticals, as you can see on the screen. We call ourselves people of action. We focus on integrity and ethics, under which we run a 4-way test. So there are articles on 4-way test which are being circulated every month. Career guidance and counseling, skill development, entrepreneurship and micro enterprises, vocational training teams, Rotary action groups. These are very, very focused groups of people who are working on specific initiatives in the society, solving problems in the society, vocational diversity and awards. So these are some of the main heads under which vocational service avenue operates. So for Rotarians, it's all a business development and professional advancement exercise. And for friends of Rotary, I mean, there are a lot of non-Rotarians also, I'm sure, who have joined today. So for friends of Rotary, this could also be a good opportunity to connect, to network with people, and certainly get benefited by a lot of other people whom they would like to connect to. The talk would be by Ms. Divya Tiwari, who would be introduced by Smita Kulkarni. And if there are any questions, you could put it into the chat box so that at the end of the session, these could be moderated. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Smita Kulkarni. I met Divya Tiwari in about 2016 when we were working towards a citywide plastic ban movement. And I realized that her knowledge about waste is so vast, and I learned so much from her, and I continue to learn. We all, especially during COVID times, we're all doing a lot of Swiggy, Zomato, ordering stuff online, and that is definitely helping us, survive this wave. But at the same time, all of us feel, that if we segregate our waste, we are doing our duty, and that ends there. So today she's going to talk about how, this is so not true. She's a passionate proponent of sustainability through resource circularity. Heavy words, but she'll explain what it really means. Divya is a principal scientist and advisor at Sahas, which is an organization that embodies this principle. Sahas was founded in 2001 with a focus on developing, propagating sustainable waste management practices to drive circular economy. Again, she'll explain what it means. Divya had joined Sahas in 2014, and prior to that, she was a supply chain consultant, SME, for more than 15 years, having done projects across industrial, life sciences, environment, IT, hospitality, and FMCG sectors. So basically, the whole corporate background. Divya is a fellow of IIM Bangalore with a PhD in supply chain management and a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. At Sahas, she's leading various programs across the country for urban and rural areas focused on community mobilization and stakeholder engagement, setting up environmentally sustainable waste management systems, and also smart tech-based program monitoring systems and development of policy framework for wider adoption and institutionalization of these initiatives at all levels. So welcome, Divya. Looking forward to your talk today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would like to say hello to everybody who has joined this session today, and I would like to thank the Rotary team and the Gyanavay Vidya team for inviting me for this talk. It's a pleasure to be part of this group. And to begin with, I would wish everybody good health, their families and friends, difficult times. And I had even checked with Smita if the talk is on, because indeed our focus and attention is entirely on something that the country is facing today, the COVID second wave. And so is the case with Sahas also, although we work in waste management, but right now the entire team is focused on providing whatever support that we can regarding this. Yes, it has been a catastrophe, and something we wouldn't wish for even our enemies. But I can't but say this, but this has also brought in some amount of focus on things that are important to us. In a way, it has removed the cloud. We can see the sky clear. We can see things which are valuable to us as human beings, as society, and what is giving us joy, caring for each other and valuing what the Mother Earth has given us. That is is something which we wouldn't have otherwise imagined, that we will come to a space where people will be able to focus on these ideas. So from that angle, I certainly see that this is a time where time for introspection, time for thinking beyond us, because we know that the situation that we are in is to do a bit or more to how we have lived in the past and the consequences of that. So before I jump into the topic today, it does sound very technical, and I'm glad to see 53 people have come for that. It does sound very industrial topic, and something which only the waste management professionals might be interested in. So I'm glad that so many people have joined in to hear this in detail. But the times that we are living in call for this. We need to. It's a great opportunity where our voice is being heard through social media. There is no denying today that citizens who are interested, they are strongly influencing what the government is doing and what the corporate sector is doing and what the other citizens are doing by and large. So from that angle, there is a huge momentum which is building in, where we all have the opportunity to share our thoughts and ideas beyond. But if we do want to make use of that opportunity, it is very important that we also understand the issues in greater detail. It cannot be, if we are giving our input to government or to corporate bodies on regarding policy, etc., if citizens are mobilizing effort towards that, it is very critical that we understand these issues. And as I said, because we are right now sitting in a pressure chamber, like how we are before our exams. At least I used to personally feel that before my exams, my absorption and thinking and retention capacity will grow multiple times. This is also like a pressure chamber that we are sitting in, and I hope that any information given at this time will stay with us and will propel us to think about it in greater details. So I'll share the deck, and please feel free to ask any questions. We will have a question answer session later on, but if you feel there's something critical that you want to, I'm not able to. Okay. Yeah, so can people see my screen? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you. So as I said, what I was saying, that in this age of social media, citizens are being heard. Hence, it is our responsibility to engage with the issue. It could be that, your interest is in something else. Your interest could be in diversity, women empowerment. It is your call. But whichever issue that you feel passionate about, it becomes your responsibility to understand those issues more deeply. And third, you need to speak up. Even if it is not, even if you're not a person who is very active on social media, but it may so happen that suppose you are talking about these issues in some gathering, in some, in your club talks, etc. And there might be some social media influencer who might get interested in this issue and might then take these ideas much farther. So don't underestimate your capacity today to influence things all over. So hence I feel the responsibility of the citizen towards social and environmental issues and action towards them becomes even more serious. So coming to the topic itself, when we talk about waste, I'm sure many of you many times must have wondered that why this headache of segregation, recycling, reduction, that instead of plastic bag, you carry a cotton bag. Why can't we burn it all? I'm sure this question must have occurred to you, because you must have heard of waste burning practices. If not burning, there could be more sophisticated name in many other countries. So why can't India go the same way? Why can't we just burn it all? So I will straight away address this question and then move to recycling itself. Now, if you look at the burning technologies, the simplest thing is each one of us just burn it behind our own houses. That kind of burning, in that burning, we will not be able to recover any energy because we are just burning, and it will be highly polluting. I'm sure most of you, be it any part of the country, must have seen waste being burnt around somewhere, and you may have smelt it. Smelling is not the sure shot sign that what is being burnt is harmful or not. The most harmful element that comes out from waste burning is something called dioxins, and they don't smell, they don't generate any kind of black smoke. So just because something is not visibly black or smelling bad doesn't mean that it is not harmful. And dioxins, many people think, I will just keep bringing out these points because people think dioxins get generated only because if there is PVC in the waste, which is not the case. Even if you have common salt has NaCl, and if we have food in that waste pile, it is very likely that when you burn it, there is likelihood of generation of dioxins, which are very harmful. You can do research on this online, what kind of impact it will have. It impacts generations. It is not just you who are being impacted. It will be generations that will be impacted by that. Or better than open burning is you could be burning it in some container. So it is contained, hence less polluting. It will, if you have a tall chimney attached with it, then yes, the pollution at the ground level may not be as intense as open burning. But again, you're not recovering any energy in this kind of setup, and pollution is happening. It is not happening immediately around that facility on the ground. It will get dispersed. but it is still in our atmosphere. It has not gone beyond our atmosphere. It is still sitting in our layer, and it will come to us in some form or the other. Even better is incineration with energy recovery. This is what you keep hearing in a lot of countries. It is certainly less polluting, but the fact is, it is less polluting only when you have very good, efficient pollution containment measures, which are significantly expensive, and it's a recurring cost. So there are numbers available which talk about that if you look at the operating cost of waste to energy plants, the pollution containment measures could constitute anywhere between 30 to 50% of the overall operating cost. So now you can imagine that if an entity is trying to make profit out of this waste to energy plant, then if they are not monitored closely, the pollution emissions are not monitored closely, then what kind of profit maximization they can do by not replacing the membranes, by not replacing the chemical coatings, etc., which are there in the chimneys. So yes, these plants are operating not too badly in Japan, in Western European nations, because as you know, there the regulatory mechanism is far too strict, and the corruption levels are low. But we know how things operate in India. So how these facilities will run in our country is I'm sure all of us can understand that how badly operated they will be. Secondly, it is not that, yes, these facilities are meant to operate at high temperatures, 800 degrees centigrade and above. But the fact is that they don't operate continuously. So they may start, stop, there could be some maintenance issue. So during the start and stop, when the temperature comes down, those stages are very, very polluting. So once the temperature goes above 800 degree or 1000 degrees centigrade, then yes, the breakdown is happening at a more elemental level. Dioxins also don't get produced at that temperature. But if it is, the temperature is lower. So when you're starting the system and you already feed your waste inside because you want to get energy from the waste, then at that stage, till it reaches the 800,000 degrees centigrade, there is significant amount of pollution. And if you are feeding in waste, the kind of waste that India generates, the calorific value should be at least around 2000 kilocalorific per kg, which is not the case. Indian waste, because we generate a lot of food waste, the calorific values are much poorer, especially if you are pumping in mixed waste. Hence, one, it will require external resources. You will need to put in oil, coal or something to burn the waste because the calorific value is very poor. And it is quite likely that the temperatures are not reaching the 1800 degrees centigrade numbers. So that's the reason, if you look at some of the waste to energy plants that India has already set up, all of them have severe pollution issues, especially for the people who live around those areas. Okhla being one of them. Okhla is a place in Delhi where the plant has been set up. You can read up about it, what kind of problems it is causing right now. There are more sophisticated burning technologies which operate at even higher temperature. One of them is called plasma, which operates at 6000 to 8000 degrees centigrade. But these plants have not really shown great success. Probably because they require very high volumes, because if you want to maintain that kind of temperature, you should have a very large setup. So hence there isn't much data available on their pollution impact, etc. Another word that you would often hear is something called pyrolysis. In this system, the waste is actually converted into fuel. So you get something like a diesel as an output. The operations are at a low temperature, hence it is not that polluting. But the challenge in pyrolysis is that the output that comes out does have contaminants of the various plastics that went into the system, into the plant, the various adhesives, gums, etc., which are added, coloring agents, whatever is added into the plastic. a large part of it remains in the fuel. So the quality is quite bad. It definitely cannot be used for running vehicles. Even when you want to use it in your open boilers, it is highly polluting where it is used. So while the pyrolysis plant as such may not be polluting, the output that comes out from pyrolysis plants, wherever that will be used, that will be polluting. So it's not that the pollution has come down significantly. The overall pollution has come down significantly. So these are the various thermal technologies that, that I have very in a simplified manner put across these 4-5 categories and given you a brief on, you will hear about these words, and these are the respective challenges in each one of them. Now coming to power generation itself, because when you say waste to energy, you are generating power out of waste. If I do waste burning, this is your basically waste to energy setup. This is the carbon emissions per kilowatt hour, megawatt hour, which is generated. This is if I burn some agri waste, etc. This is if I burn coal, this is if I burn oil, and this is natural gas. So you can see the amount of carbon emissions in case of even well operating plants. This is the difference. So if today we have abundance of oil, should we use waste as an energy resource is a question that needs to be asked. Whenever we are talking about waste to energy plant, this is an important question that should be raised. Further, people think if I burn all my waste, then I don't need landfill. It's wrong, because there is a lot of ash that gets generated. So look at this number. If I burn 1000 kgs of waste, there is reduction for sure, but you are still generating 220 kgs of bottom ash. This is a range. As I said, for waste of the kind that we generate, which is if we are sending mixed waste to these incinerators, then this percentage could go up even further because the waste doesn't get burnt too well. So there is a lot of half burnt, unburnt waste. So this number will be even higher. And the only way to handle this is to put it in landfill. So it's not that you are making zero landfill facilities if you are burning waste. Look at one more number, which is, this is the climate impact of these different technologies. This is your incinerator. So when different kinds of materials are burnt, the carbon generation is for landfilling, for combustion, which is your incineration. This is your recycling, this is your pyrolysis, and this is your hydrocracking, which is your plasma and gasification, etc. So this in waste to energy, as you can see, is one of the highest. The carbon generation, carbon footprint of the technology. So the question that people ask, if Sweden and Singapore can do it, why not India? So first factor I've already told, that these are in these countries, because the regulations and monitoring is very strict, they are able to maintain very high standards with respect to their pollution containment. That is one. Second, they are able to, their waste has a lot of dry packaging waste, which has high calorific value. Hence, the calorific value being high, they are able to run these plants at pretty high temperatures, because of which, again, the pollution impact is less. And the third factor, which is especially in case of Scandinavian countries like Sweden, Finland, etc., is that a lot of these plants were set up as heating facilities. As you know, these are cold climate countries. They have heating requirements for almost 8-9 months of the year. So these facilities generate steam, which is pumped to various residential areas around, and it is used for heating purpose. And their capex, which was invested probably 30-40 years ago, has already been recovered. And these are just facilitators for managing there. So hence there is a lot of incentive to continue with these plans. But even in these countries, there is a lot of pressure from the citizen and EU also to reduce what is going into their incineration facilities and increase the proportion of recycling and the overall waste footprint of these countries. In the question answer session, I can take up any questions if you have around this, but we will move to the next topic, which is, how does burning compare versus recycling? So if we look at energy saving, this is the comparison for if I burn 1 ton of paper versus if I recycle 1 ton of paper. So this is the difference. Yes, when I burn paper, I again generate energy. But if I recycle, then the amount of energy which is saved, because when I recycle, I will not be cutting fresh trees. I will not be transporting them. I will not be pulping them. I will not be generating so much of effluent, which then needs treatment, which requires energy again. So all those energy saving is, you can see the proportion of burning versus recycling. So hence, certainly, just from energy saving perspective, recycling is a far better approach compared to incineration. I'll give this number for some other items also. If we, burn newspaper versus recycling 2.6, look at aluminum cans. If you burn it versus if you recycle it, it is 350 times, because aluminum production is a very, very power intensive activity. And the recycling is a very good closed loop system where almost the can be entirely recycled back into a fresh can. So it's a great item to be recycled and brought in back into the system. Plastic is about 3 to 5 times, and textile is from 5 to 8 times. So there's nothing where burning stands better than recycling when we look at energy savings versus energy generation. So with this, I'm writing off incineration and moving to recycling. Before we get into the how and why of recycling, I will just talk about, just to give you an idea, what is our recycling numbers right now. Now these are the US numbers. India numbers are a little different. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a neat graph like this over the years. I'll give you India numbers anyway. Whatever is the recent numbers, I'll give those numbers. Here you can say paper recycling is great. They are able to recycle, almost close to 70% of their paper. Metal is somewhere around 35%. The percentage hasn't gone up significantly. Paper certainly has grown significantly in last few years. Glass is also about the same. It is not very high, less than 30%. And look at plastic. Plastic recycling in the US is less than 10%. And as you know, US is one of the largest consumers of materials and plastic as well. But this is the numbers. I'll show a few more numbers on plastic later on. In India, the claimed plastic recycling rate is about 60% currently. Paper is low. Paper is somewhere around 30-40%. It is, I think, primarily coming from the fact that we consume much less paper compared to Western nations. Hence, the scale is not there. And India also imports a lot of waste paper. So yes, although in our system, we have a lot of recycled paper. Almost every paper that you use, but for the bond sheets, will have 50% or more of recycled paper in it. But most of it is coming from imported waste paper. In India, the paper recycling rates are quite poor. Newspaper recycling is good because that has been there for ages, and there the whole supply chain exists right now. But other paper is a big challenge. And the second problem is because we don't so segregate our waste as much as other Western nations. And paper is something which you cannot recover if you're not so segregating. You can still recover metal, glass, and plastic from mixed waste, but paper cannot be recovered from mixed waste. So that's another reason that in India, the paper recycling rates are poorer. Metal recycling rates are also poorer, again, because it is too widespread. It's not that we get in bulk a lot of aluminum cans from somewhere or iron from somewhere. So because it is difficult to, metal could be part of other various things, and it is difficult to, pull it out, separate it out from the complex materials that we have started making. It is poor. Glass, it is not economic. So in India also, the glass recycling rates are poorer because It is a heavy item. It is difficult to move, load, unload. Hence, glass recycling rates are also pretty poor in the country. I will not go much into the recycling of other. I will come to plastic recycling because it has become a huge problem for the world and for our country as well. So for the next part, I will focus largely on plastic recycling. So let us look at some plastic recycling data. Beautiful graphics. You can see this is the PET bottle. So till now, this is a 2015 study which was done in great detail. And the numbers in 2015, the way they stand, yes, recent recycling rates are certainly better than what they were in 2015 and before, because there's a lot of pressure from the citizen and from governments for corporate entities to get their act together. So it has improved, but this is how it looked like in 2015. 8.3 billion tons is what had been produced till 2015. And of that, 4.9 billion tons had been dumped in landfills or simply thrown away. Almost 0.8 was burnt. It could be incinerators or open burning. And 2.5 is still in use. Now, this is not coming from, as you can make out, it is not the packaging waste. This is largely coming from plastic, which we do use in construction industry, in cars, in also big time into some amount of textile, carpet. So whatever is in use is, so this is basically largely hard plastic. Obviously, packaging waste is all sitting here. So look at, recycled is just this. This is your recycled. That's it. So the number is 9% is what has been recycled. Of the total plastic produced till date in 2014, just 9% had been recycled. So that tells you that certainly for plastic, recycling is not working. But you must be wondering that you must have heard for many Western nations or even for US, even in Japan, that they claim very high recycling numbers for plastics, especially, as I said, US, although it's showing here no low numbers, but Europe will claim 60-70% recycling rates in plastic. Now, the reason for that was that till before 2018, China was taking, along with Hong Kong, it was taking huge volume of recyclable waste from all over the world, be it Japan, be it, you can see Germany, you can see US, UK, France, Italy, etc. Because China was exporting material all over the world, their shipping containers used to come back empty. So they used to get this recyclable waste. So when I say waste, it is not what has been swept from their roads or mixed waste from landfill. No. What China was getting was the waste which is picked up, so segregated waste which is picked up from the household or other places. It is sorted in their material recovery facilities, and the sorted clean plastic and clean paper, clean metal is what was coming to China. Some amount was going to other countries. India, you can say about 102 billion tons is what is the number for India, but it was basically China which was running the show, and China was doing this for almost 25 years. So whatever was getting exported from US, Japan, or Germany, it was treated as per their policy, they were treating this as recycled. But in China, it was not getting recycled, although they needed raw material. But as the fact is that recycling is also polluting, it is challenging, it is, especially plastic recycling is quite difficult. It wasn't really getting recycled in an environment friendly manner. So in 2018, China said no to import of plastic and paper waste, and look at their numbers now. This is 2018 H1. This is what is going to China and Hong Kong, and the entire waste has now moved to Malaysia, Vietnam. India, thankfully, immediately, quickly brought in the ban on plastic waste import. Hence, we didn't, our numbers didn't go as much. But look at Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, and other Asian countries, which are drowned in this waste. They were even less equipped than China to handle this waste, and there is a huge catastrophe because of this change. And it's not that the production has gone down significantly. Yes, these countries are now coming under pressure from the citizen with these kind of studies coming out in open. There is a lot of pressure on these countries to get their act together. So they are looking at building on-site recycling facilities or helping other nations to improve the recycling infrastructure. But the scene right now is quite bad. If we look at the usage itself, so packaging is bulk of plastic is used in packaging, which is about 40%, about 16. This is world over figures. India numbers are a little different. India, the packaging numbers are actually almost, packaging waste is almost 50% currently of the total plastic which is used. Building is about 16, textile, you can say polyester is about 14. These are some of the other numbers. Yeah, but you can see packaging. Now, the other aspect is packaging, as you know, is much lighter than everything else here. So volume wise, you can imagine how much packaging waste is being generated, and it has really gone through the roof in COVID times, because everything is now coming packed in plastic, and there's so much home delivery and food delivery at home that this number must have really jumped. This is 2017 data. I'm sure this must have gone to above 50%, if not more. Moving to, sorry, yeah. Now look at, this is the number. This is, as I said, the study was done somewhere in 2015. These were the numbers. If we continue unabated the usage of all these various materials, this is how the picture will look like in 2050. This is the total plastic waste generation. This is how it will, where it will go, you can imagine. The red line is basically what is discarded. Yes, what is discarded, as you can see, is flattening, because there is a lot of pressure on the governments to at least start collecting it, if not recycling it. And most of it, as you can see the graph of incineration, and this is the graph for recycling. Incineration and recycling both are going up, but incineration for sure significantly. So whatever will be generated will be largely if and ever we touch this thing, it will be largely through incineration, is how it is looking like today. I will just summarize why recycling is not working, especially in case of plastic. There are obviously technical, economical, and environmental challenges. If we look at technical challenges itself, most plastics today do not have very good technologies for recycling. The reason it is so complex is because although it is hydrogen and carbon, it should, if theoretically it can be converted back into hydrogen and carbon. So that's why a lot of people, pyrolysis is something of that idea itself, that you convert oil back to oil. The plastic is made from oil and you convert it back to oil. But when we make plastics, we add different kinds of additives and fillers and coloring agents, which then makes it challenging to bring it to the quality of the virgin raw material. Then the plastic degradation is significant. So even if you do bring it back, the fiber of that plastic, mechanically it keeps degenerating. So even paper degenerates. As they say, paper cannot be recycled more than 6-7 times. Plastic degeneration is so bad that even 2-3 times of recycling will make the strength and the color and etc quite poor compared to how the fresh virgin material looks like. As I said, lot of additives, complex composites, impurity issues. Then there is poor labeling. Yes, we have 1 to 7 classification for plastic, which is written in that small recycling triangles. But I said it's not just 7. The number is huge, thousands of them. So you need definitely standardization with respect to number of materials that exist in different plastics, and label them correctly. Sorting and material handling is also a challenge because this is a very light material, so storing it, transporting it, everything is quite expensive, which is the logistics issue also. And as I said, the inherent non-circularity in this material, which is that it is not designed to be recycled and reused. That is creating technical challenges. Economic challenges, I'll just move quickly on this. Main issue is that you are competing with a very low priced virgin material. Fuel prices, as you know, fossil fuel prices have been falling, and it is only becoming cheaper with the day. And because they know that sooner or later the world will not rely on fossil fuel for energy requirement. In US itself, massive infrastructure is being created based on shale gas for not just energy, but also for plastic production. There's huge infrastructure to produce the raw material for plastic, which will then get exported all over the world. So the scale of the infrastructure is such that the price of the virgin material will be even less, and the recycled material, because of all these complications, the quality is poor and the logistics is so high that it is not able to compete with the virgin material. In case of environmental, as I have talked about various issues, there is definitely higher greenhouse gas footprint. Recycling itself, when you melt plastic, the various additives, etc., which are there in it, they get released and they add to the pollution. Waste to energy and burn technologies also produce, and the non-circularity of the recycling process of plastic. If you look at metals, as I said, if you look at aluminum can, or if you look at other metals, the material is such that you can recycle it many times. So they tend to design products where this can be easily removed and can be sent for recycling. And the raw material is quite expensive. If you look at, in case of metals, there is limited iron ore, where the prices are going up because we are running out of reserves. Hence, the recycling incentive is also higher for other materials. A lot of people might have heard about this whole concept of bioplastics, that you make plastics not from fossil fuel, but you make plastics out of biodegradable material. It could be corn starch is something which is most commonly used. There are a lot of technology has evolved around it. It is also many of the agri waste, some amount of even mushroom, etc., have been used for creating bioplastics. The issue with bioplastics is that one is that it doesn't really degrade. It is finally a material which is very similar to plastic, so it doesn't really compost. Although they claim it, we have tried multiple items at our own facilities and they do not degrade even after 1 year. They are as it is. So unless you shred them fine and you keep them at the composting happens at high temperature, 70 to 80 degrees centigrade, it is difficult for these items to degrade. And they don't degrade in areas like, if they are in sea, they behave like a regular plastic bag. So the animals getting caught in that and them sustaining through that environment is as probable as with case with any other plastic bag. The other challenges with bioplastics is labeling and standardization. There will be issues with fakes. India, we know that the moment this gets approved, unfortunately, it is being approved with the latest plastic waste management rules. There will be a lot of fakes because the cost of these are quite high compared to the regular plastic bags. And as I said, the other biggest issue is that if you start using food material for making plastic, already we are seeing soil is degraded. You will, if suppose you are using corn for making plastic bags, then imagine the impact of growing that much corn on the soil. Already we have seen that Amazon forest in this year, they were considered the sink of the world. This year, Amazon forest has generated more carbon than they have absorbed, because there's so much commercial farming which is going on for feeding to for the meat industry, that they are actually producing more carbon than absorbing it. So if we now switch to plastics being produced from food, then the issue will only become more complex. So bioplastics certainly can be used in a very limited manner, but they cannot be the main solution. Plastic problem cannot be solved by bioplastics. The key issue with recycling is how we measure and define it. So ideally, recycling must drive a reduction in the virgin resource consumption. But typically, how do we define recycling is what was diverted from the landfill. So even in India, when the rules came the first time, they said the recycling, the burn technologies were not called recycling. But with an amendment, it has been introduced that even if you're sending plastic for waste to energy or for burning in cement factories in place of coal, technically it will be called recycling. The new EPR rules which are coming out, which is extended producer responsibility, where companies like HUL, PNG, etc. need to ensure waste collection and processing. Those rules also do not differentiate between if HUL creates a bottle, or Coke creates a bottle collection system, or sends its bottles for burning in waste to energy plants, they will not have any differential treatment in the EPR framework, which is a huge gap in the EPR policy that the government is coming up with. Now, if you, which I have highlighted here, that for a corporate entity, if they just need to address disposal of their material, then sending it to waste to energy is much cheaper, because you don't have to do any sorting. You can just send it. So the cost of sending plastic to waste to energy is 10% of the cost required to collect, sort, and recycle the same amount of plastic. So look at the incentive that the companies will have to push for waste to energy plants compared to recycling. Now, I've already talked about how waste to energy plants are much worse than recycling from all angles. But this is with government now equating recycling as burning also, they're calling burning also as recycling. Most of it will start going to burn technologies. And in India, the other big issue is that we know that there is a large informal sector which is whose livelihood is dependent on recycling. But the way the system is being built is that it will drive towards waste to energy, and then snatch livelihood from these most vulnerable group in the country. Exporting is also considered recycling, which I have already talked about. It is not the case. So unless that is shown that it has been recycled, export should not be considered as the recycled material. Just to summarize what I have said, this is our linear economy where we do nothing, no recycling. We are just sending it to landfill or a waste to energy plant. This is if we do some amount of recycling. As I said, especially in case of plastic, we can only recycle few times. So yes, it will take few loops, but finally it will come to landfill or waste to energy plants. But the way forward is circular economy. As we were discussing before we started the transmission of this talk, that we want that entities like SAHAS should not exist, because there shouldn't be any waste. We should design systems in a manner that whatever we produced is designed for bringing back into the system. And recycling alone will not be able to solve that. We have to look at systems. I will move forward, that where we prioritize, reduce, and reuse. And nothing explains this more clearly than this idea of how, if we tie economic growth with material consumption, it is completely unviable. I'll just explain this whole concept with iron. We know that, as I was telling, steel and iron recycling is great, and it is very, very economical. The numbers are not too bad, and still look at some of these numbers and it will, it will shock you where we are heading. So this is a projection of, this is what this is the study that was done somewhere in 2005, and this graph shows how much steel we have produced since 1900 till 2000. So in last 100 years, how much steel has been produced. Roughly, if you come up with a rough growth rate, it is about 3.5% per annum. Okay. Now, if we maintain same kind of growth, in 270 years, we will need to produce 10,000 times more steel than what was being consumed in 2005. This is that graph. See, this is 2005 is when this study was done. This whole graph is actually sitting here because it is so low, we can hardly see it. Okay. And this is how, if we maintain same kind of growth rate, this is how this picture will look like. This is the 3.5%, and these are lower growth rates, 2%, 1.5%, 1%. Now, somebody might say that our population will stabilize, so will we need this kind of growth? But you must understand that growth in the material production is not necessarily coming from population explosion. Even countries where population is declining, there also their economies are growing, their consumption has been growing, because we continue to come up with more material based lifestyles. So even in Europe, US and Japan, where populations have stabilized or even declining, their GDPs and economies, which are tied very closely to the material consumption, are growing. Now imagine if countries like in Asia and Africa, if they also need to come up to the living standards of US and Europe, I don't know how we will be able to bring down this growth rate. So if this is how, and obviously that we don't have this much of, we will run out of iron ore. We will not have this much of iron ore. So we have no other option but to look at reduce and reuse, because the same study, I will, because of lack of time, I'll not be able to spend too much time on the other finding which came from the same study, which said that if your overall consumption tends to grow more than 1% per year, then whatever, even 90% recycling will not take you, because finally, as we have seen even in case of COVID, the exponential growth rate numbers are very scary. So is the scene here. Even in the long run, the amount of non-renewable resources that we will need, even with growth rates, of about just 1% per year, will not be met through the recycling rates. Recycling will become sensible only if the numbers are this. They have done through detailed mathematics. Only if the growth rate is less than 1%, and then we achieve 80% and above recycling, is when this will become sustainable. So it is not that recycling, reduce, reuse is something which which only sustainable, environment friendly people need to talk about. This is the need of the hour. The world cannot go on like this. It has to be fixed. Earlier the better. So and this can be done only through reduce and reuse. This will not be achieved just by recycling. We have to decouple our economic growth with material consumption. If and all these ideas come from that, that if Bangalore's population tomorrow becomes 2 crores, that should not be tied to that then we'll have 50 lakh more cars on the road. It should be through systems like Uber and Ola, where the ownership is less, but it's a shared system that our material consumption with economic growth will reduce. Yes, people are still getting jobs because that many drivers are needed, but the ownership and the consumption of materials is reduced. So this is where a lot of you must have seen this pyramid. The first time I had seen, this is really the mantra of waste management. We have to, at every cost, look at that we generate less waste in everyday life. Whatever else we can, at least reuse. Next level, if not reuse and recycle, then energy recovery and disposal. Right now, if you look, this pyramid is inverted. Most of it we are disposing. There is very little reduce and reuse attempts which are going on. So we need to come to this level to be able to live sustainably. This is how the circular economy looks like. I'm not talking about an idealistic world where everything will get recycled and there will be some waste, but the fact is that you design this is your biosystem. So how do you bring in circular economy in your wet waste? You can think of this as wet waste, and this is your technical materials. So you will have the biggest loop that you want. The closest loop should be maintenance. If not maintain, then you at least bring it in some way, reuse it. Otherwise you refurbish, remanufacture it. Then last option is recycling. So the best is the closest, that there itself you repair things, there itself you are able to use it locally, and you actually don't have ownership. I'll just give a brief how much time do we have, Smita? Can I show this film if it's okay? It's a 4-minute film.
Yes, you can show it.
Okay. So this is a film on circular economy concept. As Smita was saying, this concept is catching up. It's a 4-minute film. It will give you a good idea what this whole concept is about. 1 minute.
Our current linear economy relies on cheap, easily available resources and fossil energy. We take, make, use, and dispose, eating into a finite supply of materials and generating waste. What's more, resources and energy are getting increasingly tough and expensive to exploit. So can it work long term? This is where the idea of a performance-based circular economy comes in. What if we didn't buy the goods themselves, but the service? What if we favoured access and performance? In this model, manufacturers or retailers would remain the owners of the products. Maintenance and repairs becoming part of the deal. Even better if running costs like electricity were included. For companies, it makes sense to retain precious materials when their future availability is uncertain and when prices are forecast to rise. Premature obsolescence would be phased out rather than designed in. Buying expensive goods up front would no longer be a necessity. It already happens with mobile phones and cars. Why not fridges, washing machines, power tools, and so on? Of course, there is a wide variety of needs of individuals, of businesses. This is not a one-size-fits-all proposition. Hundreds of different solutions can be designed with tailored contracts. Variety, freedom, flexibility, and frequent upgrades. Tailored car sharing schemes. You can either use vehicles owned by manufacturers, car sharing companies, or sign up to a local person-to-person network. Communication technologies mean that our world is fast becoming a platform where we find, exchange services, or even remarket goods. It's all about access. It works for homes and office food. Couldn't a contract for a number of copies or washes from a high-end appliance be more beneficial for both providers and users? Better service at a better price. Companies win too. Materials extraction and production can represent up to 75% of the energy used to make goods. So if remanufacturing were introduced at scale, it would dramatically reduce our energy needs. At systems level, this would help the switch to renewable sources. A system that works long-term by designing out waste and keeping valuable products in the loop, maintaining or remanufacturing them, creating jobs in the process. Shifting to a performance model is part of the solution when it comes to accelerating the transition to a circular economy. There's a world of opportunities for businesses as well as individuals. The shift has already begun.
I'll just end with one number here because, you know, this is often, this gets neglected. Sorry.
Life is a circle.
Yeah, so often people talk about this, that, cotton bag also has a big footprint. It takes a lot of water to make it. I'm just sharing here a number around if I compare single-use plastic bag and with other kinds of bags, be it paper bag, this bag for life is nothing but the hard, the thick plastic bags like we used to earlier have in our, malls, etc. Those kind of bags which can be used multiple times. Or this is the non-woven PP bag, and this is the cotton bag. Now, if I use a paper bag about 3-4 times, then its environmental footprint is less than single-use plastic bag. If I use cotton bag about 131 times, then its environment footprint is less than single-use plastic bag. Now, this statistics is quoted often, and it is said that cotton bag is not environment friendly. Now, 131 times is just equivalent. If you are using that bag once a day, it is just 4 months. So if you use a cotton bag for 4 months, you have the environmental footprint is better. And after that, whatever you are doing a favor to the environment. This is when you are using fresh cotton to make that bag. Often these bags are made from discarded material, be it pre or post consumer waste. So then anyway, it has a zero footprint because you are, reusing that material. So it is already better than a single-use plastic bag. Then impact of discarded plastic bags on animals, blocked drain, etc. is not taken into account in this model. This model only looks at the carbon footprint and the water footprint. So that's all it is looked at. Finally, it is being pragmatic. Buying a cotton bag every time you shop is certainly more damaging than using plastic bags. But if you are reusing your cotton bag, especially which is made from discarded cloth, it is way better than plastic carry bags. Another small statistics I would like to give is that we talk about whether we should use paper cups or steel glasses, because 1 kg of steel production needs 260 liters of water, and then you also need to wash that steel glass, isn't it? But look at paper cup consumption. Paper cup, to make a paper cup, these are large paper cups, but even smaller paper cup will take about 4 liters of water, because making paper needs a lot of water. So every paper cup that you discard, you are wasting 4 liters of water. Now, if the steel glass, which is not made from 1 kg of steel, maybe 100 grams. So if you're saying, say, about 26 liters in its manufacturing. So if you are using it, 5 times, it is already recovered. Even if I considered washing, I don't think you will be using more than half a liter of water for using a small steel glass. So hence, you can see the number here. These are some other numbers. Every small sheet of tissue paper needs about 2.2 liters of water to make that sheet. A plastic bottle, it looks just a 1 liter plastic bottle needs 16 liters of water to make. A4 sheet of paper, it takes about 10 liters of water to make. So remember that in terms of water also, a lot of, reduce and reuse ideas are what will make a huge impact compared to recycling and burning of resources. So with that, I will end my talk. I will just quote this. Being green is not driving a hybrid car, recycling, thrift shopping. Okay, at least that's better than driving a Hummer and throwing your cans out of the window on the way to purchase a pile of new clothes. Maybe children in the country can't, you can't find on a map. But let's face it, really, truly, being green means understanding how and why humanity is burning through resources faster than ever, and why some people live in opulence while others starve on the streets. Planning a global solution that recognizes differences in culture and works with all people to solve problems respectfully. Implementing actions that will improve global quality of life, reduce waste, and increase both cultural and environmental sustainability. So yes, need of the hour today is you could be personally a very green person, but that will not bring in the dire need of today, which is, as a society for us to become green. So we need to understand the issues. We need to participate actively in their planning and implementing the solutions. I'll stop sharing with this and can open it for Q&A. Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much, Ms. Divya. I think it was a wonderful presentation with a lot of technical facts, which probably gave us a lot of insight into whatever we keep hearing or whatever comes as a suggestion. Just for your information, on behalf of Rotary District 3190, we ran a cloth bag campaign last year, wherein these were sourced from an NGO who gets them made through underprivileged people, and then these were distributed all across all the clubs. We have about 160 odd clubs in the district, so these were distributed, and then in turn we also ran at our club a program whereby we sold these bags on no profit no loss basis to promote this cloth bag. I think it's a wonderful concept that you have revived with respect to usage of cloth bags or reuse of cloth bags.
Yes,
so I think wonderful session, which gave us a lot of insight. Unfortunately, we have very less time, so we can just pick up one or two questions which are here. There is one question which I remember having seen. What is the position of recycled plastics for road making? There is no problem about contaminants. This was one of the questions I saw in the chat box. Is there anything that you would like to talk about?
So, see, we have been also trying to get our hands on some detailed study on the environmental footprint of these initiatives, because it is logical that when you put plastic in roads, as I've been telling, that plastic also contains a lot of harmful chemicals. And when you put it in the road, as we know, most roads in India will be hitting temperatures above 40, very likely 50 in summers. Road temperatures will be higher than an atmospheric temperature. And at that temperature, the plastic does leach out these chemicals. It is likely that with the next rain, it will flow into the soil around. There could be elements which might be flowing in the air also, but no study has come out. But we are not writing this out for 2-3 reasons. One, that the coal tar, which is used as a binding agent in place of plastic, also is very polluting. It also has very harmful chemicals. So we don't know how plastic compares with coal tar. We need more studies. Second, these roads have a very long life. They are claiming that it is, more than 25 years, while coal tar based roads will require relaying every 2-3 years. So from if they have similar environmental footprint, coal tar and plastic, just from the longevity perspective, this could be a better approach. But we don't have studies to really claim. As I said, there could be challenges with the pollution, but we don't have any studies and numbers to say what is the impact.
Great. There is one more question from Dr. Radhakrishna. Rotary has taken initiative propagating and manufacturing recyclable cotton menstrual pads. Okay. What's your take on this with reference to strong presence of single-use, non-biodegradable sanitary napkins? We have Dr. Meenakshi Bharat in the audience, who is driving this initiative already.
Yeah, I know, ma'am. So, if she's driving, it has to be right. But I'm saying, for any time we have doubt as to, what we are doing is right, wrong, compared to something else which exists, this mantra of the pyramid, which I had shown, which is reduce, reuse, recycle, reduce is the thing, So if with the reusable cotton pad, you are reducing waste production, it will certainly for sure be better than Even if you have a biodegradable pad, even if that pad is going for some kind of recycling, reduction sits big. So in a time of any doubt, just keep that pyramid in mind. So if you're reducing waste, it is better than recycling and disposal.
That's a wonderful message. So if there are any more questions, please reach out to us. We will be in contact with Dr. Divya Tiwari, and we'll take up those questions and reach out to her. And in any case, we are planning to have a project with respect to reduce and recycle. There is a wonderful suggestion by President Ranjani also in the chat box, which everyone can read. And we can look for doing these kind of projects and ensure that we continue to reduce and reuse. Right? Thank you very much for this talk. Can I request Shekhar to do an introduction of past President Rotarian Kishore Jagirdar, who is our chief guest today, to do a Vocational Service Excellence Award presentation to Ms. Divya Tiwari, today's speaker. Over to you, Shekhar.
All right, thank you. So I was not able to unmute myself. So thank you, Manoj. And it's really, once again, an honor to introduce the chief guest for the evening, Mr. Kishore Jagirdar, who's also the president of Vision Karnataka Foundation and chairman and MD of Infospace Management Private Limited. Vision Karnataka Foundation is the think tank and an aggregator of social impact solutions across the state, and it works for development of districts of Karnataka with strategic sustainable development goals. Winner of several prestigious awards such as Business Leadership in 2015, MSME Business Tycoon Award in 2017, Paul Harris Fellow Rotary International, and several more. Kishore comes loaded with over 26 years of rich management experience. A strategic change management specialist, a serial entrepreneur, and innovator, he co-founded Infospace Management Private Limited in 1999 to cater to SMEs with holistic support in management consulting. In the past 15 years, he's been assisting and working on various aspects of enterprise development strategies for the industry and has initiated various programs on transformational change. He's also a mentor and advisor for several mid-sized companies in India. Besides this, he is also delivered as a business coach in numerous workshops in India as well as Asian region. Among many, one of the notable achievements in the international arena has been his capacity as a member of executive board of the India-Japan Global Partnership in 2011. And Kishore was very instrumental in drafting the plan of collaboration between the two governments. He's a great promoter and numerous startups and social micro enterprises and MSME clusters. He has mentored till date. I'm sure these numbers are not very accurate as of now, but he's mentored over 100 startups and helped incubating over 230 innovations across Karnataka till date. He's a part of various prestigious panels, councils, committees, and Apex Industry Federation, and is extensively involved in policy making and development of the ecosystem in various parts of India. He's an MA in economics, MBA in marketing, and holds a PG diploma in human resource management. And one last lesser known fact about Kishore, in these days with social media, there's nothing that's hidden, right? So he's also a hidden poet and a writer. And one of the quotes from his Facebook post, which I loved, is he talks about life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. So with that quote, on behalf of RBWC and all its members who are here today, we thank you for being a part of this session today and heartily welcome you to present our Vocational Excellence Award.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm surprised where you got all these details from. So could I just start with the citation? Yeah. So Rotary District 3190 and Rotary Bangalore Whitefield Central jointly bestows Rotary Vocational Excellence Award to Ms. Divya Tiwari, Principal Scientist and Advisor, SAHAS, in recognition of excellence achieved in her chosen field of vocation and contributing to the good of the society for Gnana Vaividya Vocational Diversity Speaker Series, presented by Rotarian Kishore Jagirdar on the 12th May 2021 and attested by our district director for vocational service, and that is the Rotarian PM Radhakrishna, and then Rotarian Rajaram, we, and Rotarian Manoj Agarwal, and sorry, Mayank Agarwal, and also we have Rotarian Manoj Kabre, all attesting to this document. So with this, I would like to congratulate Ms. Divya Tiwari, and I've been hearing about all her presentation. It's really outstanding, and I think we will be taking a lot of inference from you to actually implement and apply it in various projects we are leading. Thank you very much, and best wishes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Kishore. Thank you for the opportunity to all the members here, and look forward to further interactions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rotarian Kishore Jagirdar. Over to you, Rajaram.
Thank you, Manoj. Today, actually, we just like cross the time, but I would like to make a quick thank you for everybody. I would like to thank today's speaker. I would like to thank today's speaker, Ms. Divya Tiwari, a principal scientist and advisor of SATAT. You made a very, I mean, it's full of data. Okay, we need time to digest, and then there is also like the need of the hour is we need to recycle and reduce and reuse. So your inverted pyramid definitely makes a lot of sense to us. I hope the people who are attending today, definitely they will give a thought, and then definitely they will make the necessary steps to reduce the use of plastic first of all, and also this applies to the remaining items also in our life. I would like to thank District 3190 District Governor Rotarian Nagendra Prasad for giving us the opportunity to run this program, and our district vocational service team, the Director Rotarian Radhakrishna, and also our district vocational service team in Devadas and Vachan, all those people for giving us the opportunity with the required infrastructure. And I would like to thank our club president Rotarian Manoj Kabre for giving us this opportunity, and all our members of the Rotary and also the Friends of Rotary for joining today's meeting. I would like to thank Rotarian Kishore Jagirdar for presenting the award to the speaker, and Rotarian Smita Kulkarni for introducing the speaker to us. And this definitely, like she is giving us a lot of good speakers in this series. Definitely, we are seeing a lot of traction in this, and then every program we are getting more and more audience, and then it's all like a very useful in our day-to-day life. And I would like to thank Rotarian Shekhar for introducing our chief guest. And I would like to thank all the guest club, Rotary Bangalore West, Rotary Bangalore Basmangudi, Rotary Bangalore Reach Out, Rotary Madras Marina, Rotary Satapur Hirani, Rotaract Mysore, Rotary Bangalore Northwest, Rotary Bangalore Sadasivanagar, Rotaract Farmville for your presence here today. It makes a lot of difference for us. And all the friends of Rotary, please inform your friends and then ask them to come and then attend this event. There are like much more events we are planning. Here are some of the future events. On May 19th, the same time next week, we have the topic is water conservation by Shashidhar K. And then May 26th, we have a fitness in lockdown by Vanita Ashok. These two programs are like the same. Like Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. it starts. I would like to invite everybody and attend this event and make this Jnana Vaidya series 2.0 series very successful one. Thank you all for joining today.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.